America does not have a left-right problem. That is just way too binary. There's clearly a deeper, way more complex architectural problem. I want to propose something that will likely irritate almost everyone politically. The American left is right about some very important things, as is the American right. The problem is that both sides keep taking partial observations of this same complex system and turning them into complete theories of reality, trying to simplify this super complex pattern that we're looking at. The left looks at corporations, billionaires, monopolies, lobbying groups, the cost of healthcare, labor power, environmental externalities, and wealth concentration, and says, look what happens when private power becomes too concentrated, which is correct. And the right looks at government agencies, bureaucratic incentives, regulatory capture, public spending, political self-preservation, central planning, and institutional incompetence, and says, look what happens when public power becomes too concentrated. Also correct. And somehow, we've turned these two opposing observations into opposing religions. One side says the answer is more government, and the other side says the answer is less government. I think that that is an embarrassingly primitive version. And now, the real question is which institution should have which power, at which level, for which problem, under which conditions, with which incentives, receiving which information accountable to whom. Now that is a much harder question to answer. And when you start asking it seriously, the conventional American approach to politics starts looking strangely obsolete. Because America is not just a government. America is a complex, adaptive system. Actually, it is a complex, adaptive system composed of other complex, adaptive systems. Think of individuals, families, neighborhoods, businesses, and you see cities and states, markets, universities, media organizations, courts, got Congress, federal agencies, financial institutions, nonprofits, political parties, tech platforms. All of them are interacting with one another. All of them are adapting. All of them are pursuing different objectives. All possessing different information. All capable of cooperation. All of them capable of being captured. So why are we still trying to govern this complex thing with these silly political arguments that amount to either the government is good or the government is bad, or the market is good or the market is bad, or should we support the people that have blue hair or should we support the racist people? This is not complex systems thinking. This is team sports. And I'm increasingly convinced that the central political question of the 21st century is not how much government should we have. It is how should these complex adaptive organizations best be designed, coordinated, and organized. And if the United States is one of the largest, most powerful, most complicated organizations human beings have ever created, then why should we exempt it from that questioning? Let's start with something uncomfortable. Stop assuming that government officials are uniquely benevolent. Politicians respond to incentives. Bureaucracies can protect themselves. Agencies can pursue institutional survival. Regulators can be captured by the industries which they regulate. The voting base has limited access to information. Interest groups organize around concentrated benefits. Politicians operate on election cycles that can be radically shorter than the consequences of their actions. And power, created for somebody that you trust today, can eventually be inherited by somebody which you despise tomorrow. Conservatives are right to worry about this. But now apply the same skepticism to private power. Corporations respond to incentives too. Executives protect their organizations. Capital concentrates. Monopolies emerge. Information asymmetries exist. Externalities exist. Companies lobby the government. Companies write, model legislation. Companies finance research. Companies influence media. Companies acquire competitors. Companies control infrastructure. And the fact that an institution is privately owned does not magically make domination impossible. If one employer controls your livelihood, one platform controls your access to an audience, one insurer ensures control where the treatment is economically accessible or not, or one monopoly controls an essential service, telling someone that they're technically free to leave if they don't like it, is like embarrassingly simple and doesn't get to the point of what the issue is. So I reject that choice. I don't want domination by Washington. I don't want domination by Wall Street. I don't want domination by corporations or bureaucracy or billionaires. And I don't want domination by 51% of a voting bloc. I want institutions which are properly designed so that way power remains contestable, that changes the entire political question. Instead of asking, should healthcare be provided for by the government or should it be private? Let's ask, what parts of healthcare contain genuine competitive markets? Where are the information asymmetries? Where are the natural monopolies? Where does catastrophic risk require pooling? Who should finance it? Who should provide it? Who should regulate it? At what geographic level? How can consumers exit the system? How can providers compete? How do we measure these outcomes? How do we terminate mechanisms that fail? And do the same thing with education and housing and transportation and energy and finance and AI and environmental policy and labor and public safety across all infrastructure. The answer does not have to be the same institutional mechanism every time. Obviously, sometimes the market is going to outperform the government. Sometimes the government's going to outperform the market. Sometimes a co-op is going to outperform both of them. Sometimes the right answer is going to be public financing with private provision. Sometimes it could be a public option, or direct cash, or regulation, or a municipal institution, or state experimentation with it, or an interstate compact, or federal coordination. Maybe the smartest thing that Washington can do sometimes is just get out of the way. And sometimes the smartest thing that they can do is prevent 50 different jurisdictions from dumping the consequences of their decisions on the entirety of the country or the entirety of the world. That is subsidiary without trying to romanticize decentralization. Let's put decisions at the lowest level capable of competently handling the consequences. But when the consequences cross the boundary, the authority might have to cross the boundary too. That principle alone cuts through enormous amounts of ideological nonsense and rhetoric. But there's an even deeper problem here. Our government is terrible at admitting when something does not work. Think about how strange that is. This semblance of tribalism that we could just apply to this and make absolutely no sense. When a business launches something, it performs terribly. Everything needs to be reconstructed because eventually somebody asks whether or not it should be discontinued. The government creates a program with regulation, subsidy, provision through taxes or agency, and simply surviving can gradually become evidence that it deserves to continue surviving. That is organizational insanity. A 21st century government should operate more like a learning system, with sense, predictive modeling, experimentation, proper execution, accurate measurement, learning, correction, scale, termination, failure, try again. Every major policy should have an explicit theory of how it's supposed to work, not just, we passed a bill that's going to help people. No. What causal mechanism are you claiming? What outcome are you expecting? How are you measuring it? What would count as failure? When do we review it? Who performs the evaluation? Can the institution evaluating a program benefit from declaring a program successful? Most importantly, what evidence is going to cause us to stop this nonsense? Because if no conceivable evidence could change your position, then you're no longer governing. You're just practicing a new version of theology. And this applies to my own proposal too. I don't want an American adaptive republic to become another ideology. I want a system that's capable of discovering that its designers were wrong. That means institutionalizing dissent, institutionalizing auditing properly, balancing the books, institutionalizing constrained experimentation, institutionalizing post-mortems, where we could admit failure without considering ourselves a failure at large, institutionalizing deletion of what doesn't work. Imagine Congress passing a major program where they have to specify what the objective is, where's the authority, here's the budget, what are the assumptions of how this is going to work, how does the data back it up, when are we doing reviews and audits of it, what happens if it fails, why is that considered to be radical? That would be considered basic competence in almost any serious organization. Now we consider the money in politics. The right frequently says, well, let's follow the money and see where it goes. Fine. Let's not stop there. Let's follow the money. And then through the institutions that the left is arguing for, let's follow the information. Follow the ownership. Look at the lobbying groups. Follow the appointments, the procedures, the contracts, the network, the access, regulatory decisions, measurable outcomes. Prove that your mechanisms work. Because somebody donating money to a politician does not automatically prove that they've bought them out, but pretending that the money isn't purchasing access and organizational capacity, advertising, research, legal power, or agenda-setting influence is just as unserious. The question is not whether money exists in politics. Of course it does. The question is, how does the money convert into the institutional power? And where does that conversion become unnecessary domination? This is where I think the left wing and the conservative analysis can become much more sophisticated. Michael Parenti asks, who owns, who funds, who benefits, who pays, who gets access, who has veto power? Excellent questions. And from the right, Hayek asks, who actually possesses the knowledge necessary to make this decision? Also excellent. Ostrom asks, could multiple overlapping institutions govern this problem way better than either a centralized state or a purely private market? Absolutely. The point of public choice. What happens when the government official begins pursuing his own incentives? Good. Now let's ask the same thing about CEOs and unions and nonprofits, the universities, the media organizations, the billionaires, activists, voters, the experts. Nobody gets epistemic immunity. Nobody gets moral immunity. Nobody gets institutional immunity. To me, that is what genuine political pluralism is all about. Not pretending that everybody's equally correct or that you have a moral high ground based on the political party that you choose. Please, that's not how it is. Some of these claims are true. Completely. Some of them are partially true. Some apply at different levels of analysis. Some are ideological distortions and propaganda and rhetoric and just flat out false. The point is to understand why the observation emerged, test it against reality, extract what is valid, and reconstruct the whole. Differentiate right from wrong before integrating it permanently. Now here is where the proposal becomes genuinely provocative. I don't think the greatest weakness of the American government is that it's too big. I don't think that its greatest weakness is that it's too small. I think it's badly architected for the complexity that it's attempting to govern. We have immense concentrations of authority sitting next to astonishing fragmentation. We centralize things that might benefit from experimentation and decentralization, and we have these decentralized problems whose consequences are obviously national and overarching. We create these agencies and then we deprive Congress of enough internal expertise to competently oversee them. We complain about bureaucrats exercising discretion while passing laws that leave enormous technical questions completely unresolved. We measure our programs poorly. We preserve obsolete structures. We create duplicative structures that create redundancies. We routinely confuse these institutional redundancies that protect us from capture when duplication accomplishes nothing. And then every 4 years we tell people that the solution is finding this all-powerful president that's gonna do a great job and make America the greatest thing ever, because them solely alone are this superhero. And the real test of an institution is what happens when somebody who sucks that you're afraid of controls it. Give me your favorite politician, and now design the office assuming the exact opposite gets elected. Give me your favorite regulator, and assume that the agency is being controlled by the industry that you hate the most. Give me whatever speech restrictions or government outreach that you think that they should be controlling what these people do, whether it be medically or what have you, and assume that the complete opposite is true. I mean, give me the most explicitly powerful emergency powers, and then imagine the next president that you can't stand using them. If the institution suddenly terrifies you, then you've never designed an institution. You've designed a weapon and assumed that your side would hold it forever. So, my adaptive American republic would begin from a different premise. Every institution will eventually be controlled by someone which its designers dislike. Every organization is eventually going to make mistakes. Every metric will eventually be gamed and exploited and manipulated. Every rule is going to eventually encounter circumstances which those who created it have not anticipated, and every concentration of power is going to attract people who desire that power. And therefore, the rights must constrain optimization. Power needs to be well distributed. Information must travel properly. Decisions must maintain their contestability. Expertise must inform authority without becoming sovereign. Local experimentation must survive where consequences remain local. National coordination needs to exist where consequences become national. Markets must remain competitive enough for exit to be real. The government must remain accountable enough for voices to be real. And policies must generate information which is capable of disproving the assumptions that created them. That is the correct architecture. Not left-wing government, not right-wing government, not a corporate government, not a bureaucratic government, not technocratic government. A learning republic. A republic that can detect failure, a republic which can admit failure, a republic that can reverse that failure, a republic in which no singular institution gets to create the policy, execute the policy, measure the policy, and declare itself successful without meaningful outside scrutiny. And maybe the most radical part in all of this is I'm not claiming that this system would stop us from making mistakes, because that is impossible. The United States contains hundreds of millions of strong people pursuing different values with incomplete information inside a world that nobody can completely predict. Our mistakes are inevitable. The real objective is something different. We need to make our mistakes observable, make them contestable, make them reversible, make them containable, and we can learn from. That may be the actual difference between an intelligent institution and a stupid one. Not whether it fails, whether it can learn from failure faster than failure can destroy it. So maybe the question we should start asking about America is not, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Are you a capitalist or a socialist? Do you want big government or small government? The real question we need to ask ourselves is if we are designing the United States today moving forward, knowing everything we know and we now understand about complexity and incentive structures, information, individual psychology, mass psychology, markets, bureaucracy, networking, technology, and the concentration of power. How do we actually design it? And here is the final question. The question I think that every single person and every single political ideology should be forced to answer while they stare themselves in the mirror, taking a good long look at themselves. What evidence would convince you that your preferred system is wrong? Because the political system that I want is capable of asking that question about itself. That is the adaptive American Republic. Not a perfect government, something much more difficult. A government designed to continuously discover and correct its own imperfections. And if you ask yourself that question, and there's absolutely nothing that your side can do that's going to make you wrong, then you have a lot of growing up to do. And we all do. We need to all take a look at our shortcomings and see where we can grow the most to become the best possible version of ourselves. Thank you for listening in. If you have any questions or comments, concerns, feel free to leave them down below in the comment section. I'm a coach, consultant, discussing the complexities of the world that we try to navigate every day. So if you're interested in my consulting services, I have a link in the description below. And until next time, stay smart. Take care.